He walked in wearing a cheap raincoat, looking like just another tired soul seeking shelter from the storm. Nobody in the diner looked twice. Nobody knew that the man in booth 4 was Arthur Sterling, the tech giant whose signature alone was worth billions. Nobody, except the waitress who was pouring his coffee. She saw the trembling hand. She saw the woman in the red dress slide a tiny, dissolvable clear strip into his drink. In that split second, Sarah Miller had a choice: stay silent and keep her job, or speak up and risk her life. She chose the latter. But when she whispered, "Sir, you have to leave now," she didn't just ruin a date. She triggered a chain reaction that would expose a $100 million conspiracy and put a target on her own back. This is the story of how a spilled cup of coffee took down an empire. The rain in Chicago doesn't just wash the streets, it drowns them. It was a Tuesday night in late November, the kind of night that seeps into your bones and makes you question every life choice that led you to be awake at 11:12 p.m. Sarah Miller wiped the counter of Sal's 24-hour diner for the 30th time that hour. The formica was worn down to a pale yellow in the center, a testament to decades of elbows and coffee cups. Sarah was 28, but the dark circles under her eyes and the callus on her finger from holding a pen made her look older. She adjusted her name tag, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at the sore muscles in her back. She had been on a double shift since 6 a.m. Her rent was 3 days late, and her daughter, Lily, needed braces that cost more than Sarah's car. The bell above the door jingled, cutting through the low hum of the refrigerator and the sizzle of bacon grease. Sarah didn't look up immediately. She knew the rhythm of the night shift. It was usually drunk college kids from the university, or long-haul truckers needing caffeine. But the footsteps were different. They were quiet, hesitant. She looked up. The man standing in the doorway was dripping wet. He wore a nondescript navy blue raincoat and a baseball cap pulled low, obscuring his eyes. He wasn't tall, but he held himself with a strange mixture of confidence and exhaustion. He looked around the diner, scanning the 4 other patrons, a sleeping trucker, and a couple arguing in hushed tones, before choosing the booth furthest from the window. Booth 4, the blind spot of the security camera. Sarah grabbed a pot of fresh coffee and a menu. "Just coffee black," the man said before she even reached the table. His voice was gravelly, refined but strained. As Sarah poured the steaming liquid, she got a good look at his face. He had taken off the cap. He was older than he looked from a distance, maybe early 50s, with silver streaks in his dark hair. But it was the watch that caught her eye. It was peeking out from under the frayed sleeve of his coat. It was a Patek Philippe. Sarah knew watches. Her ex-husband had been a jeweler before he gambled away their savings and disappeared. That watch cost more than this entire building. Why is a man wearing a $100,000 watch sitting in Sal's on a Tuesday night wearing a $10 raincoat, she thought. She walked back to the counter, her curiosity piqued. She pulled out her phone and, shielding it under the counter, typed in a quick search. CEO missing Chicago. Nothing. She tried. Tech Billionaire Chicago. An image popped up. It was 3 years old, from a Forbes article. The man in the picture was clean-shaven, wearing a tuxedo and holding a glass of champagne, but the eyes, piercing, intelligent, and slightly sad, were identical. Arthur Sterling, founder of Sterling Dynamics, the man who revolutionized quantum computing. Net worth, $42 billion. Sarah's breath hitched. Arthur Sterling was supposed to be in Silicon Valley or on a yacht in the Mediterranean. Rumors had been swirling for months that he was about to sign a historic merger with a rival company, Omnicorp, A deal worth billions. The news said he was in seclusion, preparing for the negotiations. So what was he doing here, eating stale pie in a diner that smelled like old fryer oil? The bell rang again. This time, the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The woman who entered didn't belong in the rain. She wore a trench coat that looked like it was tailored in Milan, and despite the downpour, her hair was an immaculate blonde bob, perfectly coiffed. She didn't scan the room. She walked straight to booth 4. Sarah watched from the corner of her eye as she pretended to refill the sugar dispensers. Arthur Sterling didn't stand up to greet her. He didn't even smile. He looked terrified. "You're late, Elena," Arthur said, his voice carrying over the empty tables. "Traffic was murder, Arthur. You know how this city is." The woman, Elena, replied. Her voice was smooth, like velvet wrapped around a knife. She sat opposite him, sliding off her coat to reveal a red dress that was entirely too formal for a diner. Sarah approached the table. "Can I get you anything, ma'am?" Elena looked at Sarah as if she were a piece of furniture. "Sparkling water. With lime. And do you have a wine list?" "We have house red and house white," Sarah said flatly. "They come from a box." Eleanor's lip curled in distaste. "Just the water. And bring a fresh cup for him. This one looks cold." As Sarah walked away, she felt a knot form in her stomach. She had worked in service for 10 years. She knew what a date looked like. She knew what a business meeting looked like. This was neither. This felt like a hostage situation. Sarah went to the back to get the water. She paused by the kitchen door, watching them through the reflection in the pie case. Eleanor was leaning forward, speaking intensely. Arthur was shrinking back, his hand gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. "You have to sign it tonight, Arthur," Elena hissed. "Marcus is losing patience." "I told you," Arthur whispered. "I need more time. The code isn't stable. If we merge now and they launch the platform, it could crash the entire grid. People could die." "That's not your problem anymore," Elena said, her voice dropping to a dangerous low. "The board has already approved the golden parachute. Take the money, Arthur. Walk away. Or do we have to release the files?" Sarah froze. Files. She grabbed the water and the fresh coffee. As she approached the table, she saw Arthur shaking his head. "Those files are fabricated, Eleanor. You know it. I never embezzled that money." "Does it matter?" Eleanor smiled, a cold, predatory expression. "By the time you prove your innocence, the merger will be done, your stock will be 0, and your legacy will be ashes. Sign the papers, Arthur." She slid a thick manila envelope across the sticky table. Sarah set the water down. She felt like an intruder in a shark tank. She wanted to run, to go back to the safety of the counter. But something kept her rooted. It was the look in Arthur Sterling's eyes. It was the look of a man who was drowning. "I'll give you a moment," Sarah mumbled, turning to leave. "Wait," Elena said sharply. "Bring him a slice of that cherry pie. He loves sweets when he's stressed." Arthur didn't object. He just stared at the envelope. Sarah walked back to the kitchen. Her heart was pounding against her ribs. This wasn't just a business dispute. This was a shakedown. A $100 million trap happening right in her section. She cut a slice of pie. Her hands were shaking. She thought about her rent. She thought about Lily's braces. "Mind your business, Sarah," she told herself. "Rich people have rich people problems. If you get involved, you get fired." But as she reached for the whipped cream, she glanced back at the booth. Elena was reaching into her purse. She wasn't getting a pen. She was pulling out a small silver vial. Sarah stopped breathing. From her vantage point behind the dessert counter, partially obscured by the coffee machine, She had a direct line of sight to booth 4. Arthur was looking down at the contract, his head in his hands, reading the fine print of his own destruction. He wasn't watching Elena. Elena moved with the practiced grace of a magician. Her left hand adjusted her hair, blocking Arthur's peripheral vision, while her right hand hovered over the fresh cup of coffee Sarah had just delivered. It happened in less than 2 seconds. Elena uncorked the silver vial with her thumb and tilted it. A single, clear drop fell into the steaming black coffee. It vanished instantly. No fizz. No color change. She capped the vial and slipped it back into her purse in one fluid motion, then clasped her hands on the table, the picture of patience. "Read it carefully, Arthur," Elena said soothingly. "We want you to be comfortable." Sarah stood in the kitchen, the plate of cherry pie trembling in her hand. Her mind raced. What was that? It could have been anything. A sweetener? Unlikely for a woman who wouldn't drink box wine. Medicine? Why would she hide it? Sarah's mind flashed back to 3 years ago. She had worked briefly as a bartender at the Sapphire Room, a high-end club downtown. She remembered the training. Watch the drinks, watch the hands. They had warned the staff about a new wave of corporate espionage drugs, compounds that mimicked heart attacks or strokes, untraceable after 2 hours. If he drinks that and signs the paper, and then dies of a heart attack in the cab ride home, the merger goes through and she gets away with it. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced Sarah's chest. She looked at the phone on the wall. Calling 911 would take too long. By the time they explained the situation, Arthur might have already taken a sip. And what proof did she have? A waitress accusing a well-dressed woman of poisoning a billionaire? They'd laugh her out of the precinct. Arthur picked up the coffee cup. He blew on the steam. Sarah moved. She didn't think. She just moved. She burst out of the kitchen, the plate of pie forgotten on the counter. She walked fast, her rubber-soled shoes squeaking on the linoleum. Arthur brought the cup to his lips. "Excuse me," Sarah said, louder than she intended. Arthur jumped, sloshing a bit of the coffee onto the saucer. He didn't drink it. He looked up, annoyed. "What is it?" Elena glared at her. "We didn't call for you." Sarah's heart was hammering so hard she thought it would crack a rib. She stood at the edge of the table, her hands clenched in her apron. She needed a lie. She needed a reason to take that cup away without causing a scene that would get her killed. I'm so sorry, sir," Sarah stammered, her eyes darting from Arthur to the deadly cup. "I made a mistake. That coffee." "What about it?" Arthur asked, his brow furrowed. It's decaf," Sarah lied. "You asked for regular. I grabbed the wrong pot. I know you have a long drive. Let me replace it." She reached for the cup. Elena's hand shot out and clamped around Sarah's wrist. Her grip was iron. Her nails dug into Sarah's skin. "It's fine," Elena said, her voice icy. "He doesn't mind decaf. Leave it." The tension at the table spiked. The air felt charged with electricity. Arthur looked at Elena, surprised by her aggression. "Elena, let go of the girl," Arthur said, confusion coloring his tone. "I do want regular. I need the caffeine." "Just sign the papers, Arthur, and we can leave," Elena snapped, not looking at him, her eyes locked on Sarah's. It was a stare that promised consequences. "Walk away, waitress. Or else." Sarah looked at the cup. It was inches from Arthur's hand. She looked at the contract. Transfer of assets. Sterling dynamics. She looked at Arthur. He looked tired, beaten, and completely unaware that he was sitting across from his executioner. Sarah pulled her wrist back, breaking Elena's grip. She took a deep breath. She couldn't play the clumsy waitress game anymore. The stakes were too high. She stepped in between them, blocking Arthur's reach for the cup. She looked Arthur dead in the eye. "Sir," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper, urgent and terrifyingly serious. "You have to leave now." Arthur blinked. "Excuse me." "You need to get up, walk out that door and get in your car," Sarah said, speaking rapidly. "Do not drink that coffee. Do not sign that paper." "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Elena stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She was tall, looming over Sarah. "Manager! We need a manager here." "You put something in his drink," Sarah said loudly. The silence in the diner shattered. The trucker in the corner sat up. The arguing couple stopped. "I saw you," Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength. "I saw you take a silver vial out of your purse and put a drop in his cup while he was reading. I don't know what it is, but I know you're trying to hurt him." Arthur's face went pale. He looked at the cup, then at Eleanor. "She's lying!" Eleanor shouted, her poise cracking. "She's crazy. Arthur, she's looking for a payout. Look at her, she's a nobody." Arthur looked at the coffee. He looked at Sarah. He saw the genuine terror in her eyes. He saw the red marks on her wrist where Elena had grabbed her. Arthur Sterling was a genius. He built logic gates and processors. He dealt in facts. And the fact was, Elena never drank tap water. Yet she had ordered it. Elena hated diners, yet she insisted on meeting here. Arthur stood up slowly. "Show me your purse, Elena," Arthur said quietly. "What?" Elena laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Don't be ridiculous. If you have nothing to hide, show me the purse. If there is no vial, I'll sign the papers right now. I'll give you everything." Arthur extended his hand. "Give it to me." Elena's eyes darted to the door, then to Arthur, then to Sarah. The mask of the sophisticated socialite fell away. Beneath it was something feral. She didn't hand over the purse. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket. Sarah saw the shape of the object before it cleared the fabric. It wasn't a vial this time. It was gunmetal. "Get down!" Sarah screamed. She shoved Arthur Sterling with all her strength. He toppled sideways out of the booth, crashing onto the dirty linoleum floor, just as the crack of a silenced pistol spit through the air. The vinyl seat where Arthur's head had been a second ago exploded in a puff of yellow foam. Chaos erupted. "He's mine!" Elena screamed, raising the weapon again. "Run!" Sarah yelled, grabbing Arthur by the collar of his raincoat. "Kitchen, go!" They scrambled on hands and knees as another bullet shattered the window above them, showering them in glass and rain. The billionaire and the waitress, united by adrenaline and a drop of poison, crawled toward the swinging metal doors of the kitchen, leaving the contract and their old lives behind on the table. The kitchen of Sal's diner was a narrow corridor of stainless steel and fluorescent light. Sarah didn't stop to check if Arthur was keeping up. She could hear his expensive dress shoes slapping frantically against the greasy tile behind her. "Move, move, move!" she screamed, shoving past Manny, the night shift cook who was standing by the grill holding a spatula, mouth agape, staring at the chaos unfolding in the dining room. "Sarah, what the—" Manny started. Bang! A third shot punched through the swinging metal door, embedding itself in the industrial refrigerator with a deafening clang. A jar of pickles exploded, showering the floor in vinegar and glass. Manny dropped to the floor, covering his head. Sarah grabbed a heavy sack of flour from the prep table. She ripped the top open and hurled the contents toward the doorway, just as the doors swung open again. Elena burst through, gun raised, her face a mask of cold fury, but she was met with a white cloud of particulate dust. She coughed, blindly firing a round into the ceiling. "Out the back, now!" Sarah yelled, grabbing Arthur's arm and dragging him toward the heavy steel security door that led to the alley. She slammed her hip against the panic bar. The door groaned and flew open, spilling them out into the torrential Chicago downpour. The cold rain hit them like a physical blow, instantly soaking them to the bone. The alley was dark, illuminated only by the flickering yellow light of a street lamp at the far end and the red glow of an exit sign. Dumpsters overflowed with wet cardboard. "My car," Arthur gasped, pointing toward the street end of the alley. "My driver. Thomas. He's parked right there." A black Maybach. They sprinted toward the mouth of the alley. Sarah's heart sank. She knew what they would find before they got there. You don't walk into a diner to kill a billionaire without clearing the board first. The black Maybach was there, idling at the curb. The wipers were swishing back and forth rhythmically. Arthur ran to the rear passenger door. "Thomas, go! Drive!" He yanked the handle. It was locked. He pounded on the glass. "Thomas!" Sarah reached the car a second later. She looked through the driver's side window. The interior light was dim, but she saw enough. Thomas, a burly man in a suit, was slumped over the steering wheel. There was a small, neat hole in the side of his head. The window on the street side was shattered. "Oh my God," Arthur whispered, stumbling back, his face draining of blood. "They killed him. They actually killed him. Arthur, get away from the car." Sarah grabbed him by the lapels of his raincoat. "It's a trap. If the car is here, they know exactly where we are." As if on cue, tires screeched at the end of the block. A black SUV with tinted windows whipped around the corner, its headlights blinding them. "My car is in the employee lot back there," Sarah yelled over the rain. "Run!" They turned and sprinted back the way they came, splashing through deep puddles of dirty water. Sarah could hear the SUV accelerating behind them. They reached the back of the diner. Parked next to the dumpster was Sarah's 2008 Honda Civic. It was rusted around the wheel wells, the bumper was held on with duct tape, and the muffler was hanging low. To Sarah, it looked like a chariot. She fumbled in her apron pocket for her keys. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped them. "No! No! No!" she cried, dropping to her knees in the mud. "They're coming!" Arthur shouted, looking down the alley. The SUV was tearing down the narrow passage, scraping sparks against the brick walls. Sarah's fingers closed around the jagged metal of her car key. She scrambled up, jammed it into the lock, and threw the door open. "Get in!" Arthur Sterling, a man accustomed to private jets and chauffeurs, dove into the passenger seat of the beat-up Honda, his knees hitting the dashboard. Sarah jumped in the driver's side and slammed the door. She cranked the ignition. Chug, chug, click. "Come on, baby, please," Sarah begged, hitting the steering wheel. "Not today." The SUV was 50 feet away. A man was leaning out the passenger window, raising a submachine gun. Sarah turned the key again, stomping on the gas pedal. The engine roared to life, with a sound like a lawnmower choking on a rock. Sarah threw the gear shift into drive and floored it. The Honda squealed, tires spinning on the wet asphalt for a terrifying second before gripping. The car shot forward, fishtailing out of the lot and onto the side street, just as a hail of bullets chewed up the brick wall where they had been parked. Sarah didn't look back. She took the first corner hard, drifting into the oncoming lane, correcting, and speeding toward the on-ramp for I-90. "Are you hit?" she asked, her voice trembling. Arthur was breathing heavily, checking his chest. No, I don't think so. You?" "I'm fine," Sarah said, though she couldn't feel her legs. She merged onto the highway, blending in with the late-night traffic of semi-trucks and weary commuters. She checked the rearview mirror. No black SUV. Not yet. Arthur slumped back against the torn fabric of the seat. He looked at the dashboard, at the check engine light that had been on for 2 years, and then at Sarah. "You saved my life," he said, his voice filled with shock. "Who are you?" "I'm Sarah," she said, her eyes glued to the road. "And you owe me a really big tip." They drove for 40 minutes in silence. Sarah took random exits, doubling back, weaving through the industrial district south of the city. She stuck to the shadows, avoiding the toll roads where cameras would snap her license plate. Arthur Sterling seemed to age 10 years in the passenger seat. He had taken off his wet coat and was shivering. He kept reaching into his pocket, pulling out his smartphone, a sleek, prototype device that wasn't even on the market yet. "I need to call my security team," Arthur said, his thumb hovering over the screen. "I have a private contractor group, ex-Mossad. They can extract us." "Don't!" Sarah shouted, startling him. "What? I need help." "Think, Mr. Sterling," Sarah said, her grip on the steering wheel white-knuckled. "That woman, Eleanor, she knew exactly where you were. She knew you ordered regular coffee, not decaf. She knew your driver's schedule." "How did she know?" Arthur paused. She knows my schedule." "She knew you were at a random diner in the middle of nowhere," Sarah countered. "Someone is tracking you, and if you turn that phone on, they'll have a GPS lock on us in 10 seconds. Arthur stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. He slowly lowered it. "You're right. My God, you're right. The phone has a hard-coded tracker for kidnapping protocols. If Eleanor has access to the security grid, then she knows exactly where that phone is," Sarah finished. "Roll down your window." "What?" "Roll it down." Arthur cranked the manual handle. Cold rain whipped into the car. "Give me the phone," Sarah commanded. Arthur hesitated for a fraction of a second. That phone likely contained billions of dollars of data, but he handed it over. Sarah didn't hesitate. She flung the device out the window as they crossed a bridge over the Chicago River. It vanished into the dark water below. "Okay," Arthur exhaled, wiping rain from his face. "Now we're invisible. But we're also alone." "Not completely," Sarah said. She pulled the car off the main road, navigating toward a neon sign flickering in the distance, the Blue Jay Motel. Vacancy. "We can't stay there," Arthur said, looking at the peeling paint and the flickering lights. "It's unsanitary." "It's cash only, and they don't ask for ID," Sarah said sharply. "I stayed here once when my ex kicked me out. It's the safest place in the city right now, because people like you don't even know it exists." Sarah parked the car behind the building, hiding it between a dumpster and a broken vending machine. She pulled a crumpled wad of cash from her tips jar in her purse. $64. "Stay here. Keep your head down," she ordered. 10 minutes later, they were inside room 12. It smelled of stale cigarette smoke and bleach. The carpet was sticky, and the heater rattled like a dying engine. But the door had a deadbolt. Sarah locked the door and slid the chain into place. She dragged a heavy wooden chair under the doorknob. Only then did she allow herself to collapse onto the edge of the sagging bed. Arthur stood in the middle of the room, looking out of place in his tailored suit, now ruined by rain and grease. He paced the small room, his energy returning. "I have to explain," Arthur said, turning to Sarah. "You deserve to know why people are trying to kill us." "I figured it was about the money," Sarah said, rubbing her temples. "It's not about money, it's about control," Arthur said. He sat on the opposite bed. "Elena isn't just my fiancée. She was planted. She works for a shadowy consortium called the Vanguard. They invest in defense contractors, surveillance states, weapon systems." "And you build computers," Sarah said. "I built the Archer," Arthur corrected. "It's a quantum processing unit. It was supposed to model climate change, cure diseases. But 3 months ago, I realized what it could really do. It can break any encryption in the world. Bank records, nuclear launch codes, power grids. If the Vanguard gets control of Sterling Dynamics, they get the Archer. They could hold the entire world hostage. Sarah stared at him. That sounds like a movie plot. The $100 million she offered me wasn't a buyout, Arthur said grimly. It was a bribe to hand over the encryption key, the biometric key. He tapped his watch, the Patek Philippe. The watch? Sarah asked. Not the watch. Under it. Arthur undid the clasp of the expensive timepiece. On the underside of his wrist, embedded just beneath the skin, was a faint, blue glowing scar in the shape of a circuit. A subdermal drive, Arthur explained. It contains the root access code. Without this, the Archer is just a hunk of metal. They tried to poison me, to incapacitate me, probably to drag me to a lab and surgically remove it. If I had signed those papers, they would have owned the company legally. Then, they would have cut this out of my arm and disposed of my body. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wet clothes. She looked at the door. So, they aren't going to stop? No, Arthur said. They can't. The merger deadline is in 48 hours. If they don't have the key by then, the government seizes the tech for national security. They need me. We need help, Sarah said. Real help, not police. If they can get to a billionaire, they own the cops. I have a contact, Arthur said. An old friend. He runs an investigative journalism unit. He's the only one who believed me when I said I was being watched. His name is Marcus Webb. Webb? The guy from the Tribune? Sarah asked. She read the paper on her breaks. Yes, but I can't call him. We have no phone. Sarah looked at her purse. She had her own phone, a cracked Samsung with a battery that lasted 4 hours. If we use my phone, they track us, Sarah said. Not if we're quick, Arthur said, and not if we move immediately after. Sarah handed him her phone. Arthur dialed a number from memory. He put it on speaker. It rang once, twice. Yeah? A gruff voice answered. Marcus, it's Arthur. Protocol 0. There was a pause on the line. Arthur? Jesus, man. The news is reporting you died in a car accident an hour ago. Single vehicle collision. Body burned beyond recognition. Sarah gasped. They had already covered it up. They had killed Thomas and burned the car to fake Arthur's death. I'm alive, Arthur said, his voice shaking. But they have Elena. She's one of them. I'm with a civilian. We are at... He looked at Sarah. Sarah shook her head. Don't say the location. We are safe for the moment, Arthur corrected. But we need extraction. I have the key. Listen to me carefully, Arthur, Marcus said, his voice dropping. You can't go to the police. The chief of police sits on the board of the company, merging with you. You need to get to the Federal Plaza, the FBI field office. But not the front door. You need to get to Special Agent Miller. She's the only one investigating the Vanguard. Miller? Arthur looked at Sarah. Related? Common name, Sarah whispered. How do we get to her? Arthur asked. Meet me at Union Station in 2 hours, Marcus said. The Great Hall, under the clock. I'll bring a team to get you to the feds. If you don't show up, I'll publish everything I have and hope it's enough. 2 hours, Arthur said. Union Station. He hung up. Sarah immediately pulled the battery out of the back of her phone. Union Station, Sarah said, standing up. That's right downtown. It's the most public place in the city. Exactly, Arthur said, a glimmer of his old confidence returning. Hard to kill a man in front of 1,000 commuters. Or, Sarah said, checking the load in her pistol. No, she didn't have a pistol. She grabbed her purse and her car keys. Or it's the perfect place for a trap. She walked to the window and peered through the blinds. The rain had stopped. The parking lot was empty. We have to ditch the Honda, Sarah said. They'll be looking for it by now. The APB on the Waitress who kidnapped the Billionaire is probably going out as we speak." "Kidnapped?" Arthur blinked. "That's how they'll spin it," Sarah said grimly. "Rich man, poor desperate waitress. I'm not the hero in their story, Arthur. I'm the villain, and you're the hostage." She turned to him. "We need a new car, and we need disguises." Arthur looked down at his ruined suit. "I haven't stolen a car since, well, ever." Sarah cracked a weary smile. "Good thing I grew up in South Chicago. Come on, I know a guy who runs a chop shop 3 blocks from here. Let's go get you a new ride." The rain had finally ceased, leaving the streets of Chicago slick and black, reflecting the city lights like a shattered mirror. Sarah led Arthur down a labyrinth of side streets, moving away from the motel and deeper into an industrial district that smelled of rust and ozone. Arthur Sterling, a man whose shoes cost more than most people's monthly mortgage, was limping. He had discarded his ruined raincoat in a dumpster 3 blocks back. Now, in just his suit trousers and a dress shirt stained with diner coffee, he looked less like a titan of industry and more like a man who had lost a bar fight. "This place," Arthur whispered, eyeing a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. "It's not on any map I've ever seen." "That's the point," Sarah said, pulling her collar up against the chill. She stopped in front of a corrugated metal garage door that looked like it had been kicked in a dozen times. She banged on the metal in a rhythmic pattern. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks. A sliding peephole opened. A pair of bloodshot eyes peered out. "We're closed," a gravelly voice grunted. "Jax, it's Sarah. Open up." The eyes widened slightly. The sound of heavy chains rattling echoed from inside, and the small door within the large garage door creaked open. Jax was a mountain of a man, covered in grease and tattoos. He held a large wrench like a toy. He looked at Sarah, then at Arthur. "Sarah, you look like hell," Jax said, stepping aside to let them in. "And who's the suit? He looks like he owes money to the wrong people." "He's a friend," Sarah said, stepping into the warmth of the garage. The shop was filled with half-dismantled cars, luxury SUVs, sports cars, sedans, all in various stages of being stripped for parts. This was a chop shop, a graveyard for stolen vehicles. "We need a car, Jax," Sarah said, cutting to the chase, "and we need it off the books. No papers, no GPS, nothing digital." Jax laughed, a dry, hacking sound. "You know how this works, Sarah. Cash on the barrel, and you're still paying off that Honda I fixed up for you last year." "The Honda is gone," Sarah said. "We need something fast and tough." "I got nothing for charity," Jax said, crossing his massive arms. "Unless the suit here is carrying." Arthur stepped forward. He looked around the shop, his eyes scanning the engines hanging from chains, the diagnostic computers on the workbenches. His gaze landed on a sleek, cherry-red Ferrari in the corner, its hood open. 2 mechanics were arguing over it, looking frustrated. "The ECU is locked," Arthur said suddenly, his voice calm. Jax turned. "Excuse me?" "That Ferrari," Arthur pointed. "Your boys are trying to bypass the security protocol to strip the engine, but the new 488 models have a biometric handshake. If you force it, you'll brick the engine computer. It'll be worthless scrap metal." Jax narrowed his eyes. "And how would you know that, suit?" "Because I wrote the code for the chip that controls it," Arthur said. He walked over to the car, ignoring the stunned looks of the mechanics. He picked up a laptop connected to the car's diagnostic port. His fingers flew across the keyboard. "He's bluffing," one of the mechanics sneered. "Quiet," Jax ordered, watching Arthur. For 2 minutes, the only sound in the shop was the frantic clicking of keys. Arthur Sterling was in his element. He wasn't a billionaire here. He was an engineer. "There," Arthur said, hitting the enter key with a flourish. The Ferrari's engine roared to life, a beautiful, throaty growl that shook the tools on the walls. The anti-theft light on the dashboard turned off. Arthur turned to Jax. "I just unlocked a $300,000 engine for you. I think that's worth a trade." Jax looked at the car, then at Arthur, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Damn, you're handy to have around, Suit." Jax walked over to a wall of keys. He tossed a set to Sarah. 1995, Ford F-150, blue, back lot. It's got a rusted bed and the heater smells like wet dog, but the engine is a tank. No GPS, no computer. Indestructible. "Perfect," Sarah said, catching the keys. "And hey," Jax pointed to a pile of clothes in the corner, forgotten laundry from the mechanics. "Get changed. You two stick out like sore thumbs." 10 minutes later, they emerged from the back of the shop. Arthur was wearing a grease-stained grey jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big, with a trucker hat pulled low. Sarah wore a baggy hooded sweatshirt and men's work boots. They climbed into the truck. The engine turned over with a mighty roar. As they pulled out of the garage, Arthur looked at his hands, stained with oil from the laptop. He looked strangely satisfied. "I haven't written raw code in 10 years, he said, a small smile playing on his lips. "I forgot how good it feels to fix something." "Don't get too comfortable," Sarah said, shifting the truck into gear and merging onto the dark street. "We're not fixing engines anymore. We're going to fix a conspiracy." She checked the dashboard clock. "We have 40 minutes to get to Union Station. Are you sure about this Marcus guy?" Arthur's smile faded. He touched the scar on his wrist beneath the dirty jumpsuit sleeve. "He's the only friend I have left." Union Station at 1 a.m. was a cavernous echo chamber of stone and glass. The great hall, with its soaring, barrel-vaulted skylight and marble floors, felt like a cathedral built for the worship of transit. Usually bustling with thousands of commuters, it was now eerily quiet, populated only by the janitorial staff, buffering the floors and a few homeless souls sleeping on the wooden benches. Sarah and Arthur entered through the Canal Street entrance. They walked apart, 10 feet of distance between them, pretending to be strangers. Sarah scanned the perimeter. Her nerves were frayed wires. Every shadow looked like a gunman. Every janitor looked like an assassin. She kept her hand in the pocket of her hoodie, gripping a heavy wrench she had swiped from Jax's shop. It was a pathetic weapon against a silenced pistol, but it was all she had. "Under the clock," Arthur had said. The massive clock in the center of the hall hovered like a judging eye. Arthur walked toward the center, his gait heavy, feigning the exhaustion of a night shift worker. He reached the designated spot and stopped, looking up at the timetable board, which displayed a list of cancelled trains. Sarah lingered by a pillar, pretending to tie her boot. She watched Arthur. She watched the balconies overlooking the hall. Then she saw him. A man in a trench coat stepped out from the shadows near the ticket counters. He was tall, wearing wire-rimmed glasses. He looked nervous. He checked his watch, then scanned the room. It was Marcus Webb. Sarah recognized him from the newspaper photo Arthur had shown her on the drive over. Arthur saw him too. He gave a subtle nod and began to walk toward Marcus. Sarah's gut twisted. Something was wrong. Marcus wasn't alone. He was standing in a pool of light, but his eyes kept darting to the dark corners of the mezzanine level above them. He wasn't looking for Arthur. He was looking for permission. Sarah's eyes snapped up to the balcony. A glimmer. A reflection of light on glass. A scope. "Arthur, stop!" Sarah screamed, her voice echoing violently through the empty hall. Arthur froze halfway to Marcus. He turned to look at Sarah. "It's a trap!" Sarah yelled, abandoning her cover and sprinting toward him. At that exact moment, Marcus Webb's face crumbled into an expression of pure devastation. "I'm sorry, Arthur," he mouthed. "They have my wife." Crack. A bullet struck the marble floor inches from Arthur's foot, sending stone chips flying. "Get down." Arthur dove behind a heavy wooden bench, just as the air filled with the suppressed thwip-thwip of silenced gunfire. Bullets chewed into the wood of the bench. The few people in the station began to scream and scatter. Sarah slid across the polished floor, crashing into the bench beside Arthur. "He sold us out!" Sarah shouted over the noise. "They leveraged him," Arthur gasped, looking at Marcus, who was now running toward the exit, tears streaming down his face. "They must have his family." "Well, right now, I'm worried about our family," Sarah yelled. "Where are the shots coming from?" "Mezzanine, north side," Arthur said. "We're pinned." Suddenly the firing stopped. A voice, amplified by a megaphone, boomed through the great hall. It was calm, professional, and terrifyingly familiar. "Arthur," Elena's voice echoed off the marble walls. "This is getting tedious. Come out, sign the transfer. We can end this." Sarah peeked around the edge of the bench. Elena was standing on the grand staircase, flanked by 4 men in tactical gear. She wasn't hiding anymore. She looked like a queen surveying her kingdom. "You have nowhere to go," Elena continued. "We have the exits covered. The police are 5 minutes away, and when they arrive, they will find a confused, mentally unstable waitress who shot a billionaire in a failed robbery attempt." Sarah looked at Arthur. "She wrote the script. I'm the patsy." "I won't let that happen," Arthur said, a hard edge in his voice. "We need to move." "Move where?" "We're sitting ducks." Arthur looked at the floor. "Not on the floor. Under it." "What?" "The service tunnels," Arthur said. "Union Station has miles of abandoned mail tunnels and maintenance shafts beneath the tracks. I read the schematics when I was bidding to upgrade their grid." "How do we get in?" Arthur pointed to a nondescript metal maintenance door about 20 yards away, near the baggage claim area. "There." "That's 20 yards of open ground," Sarah said. "I'll draw their fire," Arthur said, preparing to stand. "No!" Sarah grabbed him. "You're the package. If you die, everybody loses. I'll draw them." Before Arthur could argue, Sarah grabbed a heavy brass trash can from next to the bench. "Hey, Princess!" Sarah screamed at the top of her lungs, standing up. Eleanor turned on the stairs, her eyes narrowing. "You forgot my tip!" Sarah yelled. She hurled the brass can with all her might. It clattered loudly across the marble floor, making a noise like thunder. The tactical team instinctively turned their weapons toward the noise. "Run!" Sarah hissed. They bolted. Bullets sparked against the floor behind them, stinging their legs with stone fragments. They sprinted for the maintenance door. 10 yards. 5 yards. One of the tactical officers adjusted his aim. He fired. Arthur grunted, stumbling forward, clutching his shoulder. "Arthur!" Sarah grabbed him, hauling him the last few feet. They crashed into the door. It was locked. "Move!" Sarah shouted. She raised the heavy wrench she had stolen and smashed the handle of the door. Once. Twice. The old lock shattered. They tumbled inside, into the darkness of a stairwell, just as the door frame splintered under a hail of gunfire. Sarah kicked the door shut and jammed the wrench through the handles to bar it. "Are you hit?" Sarah asked, fumbling for the light on her phone, but she remembered she didn't have one. It was pitch black. "Just a graze," Arthur lied. His voice was tight with pain. "Shoulder. I can move." "They'll be through that door in seconds," Sarah said. "Down," Arthur said. "We have to go down." They descended into the bowels of the city. The air grew colder and smelled of damp earth and old steel. They were entering the forgotten underworld of Chicago, a maze of tunnels that hadn't seen the light of day in 50 years. Above them, they heard the door crash open. "Flush them out!" Elena's voice screamed down the shaft. "I want them dead. Forget the contract. Just bring me the hand. Bring me the hand with the watch." Sarah shivered. Elena didn't care about the signature anymore. She was going to cut Arthur's hand off to get the biometric key. "Come on," Sarah whispered, supporting Arthur's weight. "We're not dead yet." The tunnels were a suffocating labyrinth of dripping pipes and ancient brickwork. The only light came from the dancing beams of tactical flashlights chasing them through the gloom. Arthur was slowing down. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the searing pain in his shoulder. He stumbled, his knees hitting the wet concrete with a splash. "I can't!" he wheezed, clutching his arm. "Sarah, you have to go. They want the key. They want me. If you run now—" "If I run now, I'm an accessory to murder," Sarah snapped, hauling him to his feet. "And I'm not finishing this shift without a win. Move!" They rounded a corner and skidded to a halt. Dead end. A massive steel grate blocked the path. Behind it, the roar of a subway train vibrated through the walls. To their right was a rusted maintenance panel. To their left, nothing but damp walls. The footsteps behind them stopped. 3 beams of light pinned them against the steel grate. Elena stepped into the light, her heels clicking on the wet floor. She held a pistol in one hand and a surgical bone saw in the other. It revved with a high-pitched whine that echoed in the small space. "End of the line, Arthur," Elena said, her voice echoing. "I'm done asking." She signaled her men. 2 mercenaries stepped forward, splashing through the inch-deep water that covered the tunnel floor. Arthur leaned against the maintenance panel, his breathing ragged. He looked at the water covering the floor. He looked at the heavy industrial power conduit running along the wall next to him, the feed for the subway's 3rd rail. The casing was cracked, exposing copper thick as a thumb. He looked at Sarah. He pointed to a wooden shipping pallet resting on a raised concrete lip just out of the water. "Get on the wood," Arthur whispered. "What?" "Get on the wood." Sarah didn't ask questions. She scrambled onto the dry pallet. "Last chance, Arthur," Elena sneered, raising the gun. "Give me the hand." "Come and take it," Arthur said. As the 2 mercenaries lunged and Eleanor stepped forward into the puddle, Arthur grabbed the heavy wrench from his pocket. With a primal yell, he swung it not at them, but at the exposed power conduit on the wall. Metal met live copper. Crack boom. A blinding blue arc of electricity exploded from the wall. The current surged through the wrench, which Arthur instantly dropped, traveled down the wall, and electrified the standing water on the floor. It was over in seconds. The voltage locked Eleanor and her men in a rigid, convulsive dance before throwing them backward. They collapsed into the steaming water, unconscious. Arthur, grounded by his rubber-soled boots and having let go of the tool instantly, slumped against the dry wall, sliding down to the floor. Silence returned to the tunnel, save for the distant rumble of the train. Sarah hopped off the pallet, checking Elena's pulse. "They're alive," she whispered. "But they're out cold." She grabbed Elena's phone from her pocket. It was waterproof. She dialed 911. "Police," Sarah said, her voice steady. "I have a confession to make, and I have the bodies to prove it." 2 weeks later, the bell at Sal's diner jingled. Sarah was behind the counter, but she wasn't wearing a uniform. She was wearing a blazer. She signed the deed to the building Sal had just sold her. The door opened. Arthur Sterling walked in. His arm was in a sling, but he looked like $1 billion again. He sat in booth 4. "Coffee?" Sarah asked, smiling. "I promise it's safe." "I think I'll stick to water," Arthur laughed. He slid an envelope across the table. It wasn't a check. It was a partnership agreement. "I need a head of security who notices details." And I hear you're looking for a career change. Sarah picked up the envelope. I don't know, Arthur. The hours here are pretty good. Sarah, Arthur said, you saved my life. Consider this your tip. Sometimes the person pouring your coffee is the only thing standing between you and disaster. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal and redemption, hit that like button and subscribe for more thrillers. Comment below, what would you do if you found out your customer was a target? See you in the next video.